The pregnant widow's knees hit the wooden platform. 8 months along, 3 children clinging to her threadbare skirt, and not a single hand in the crowd reached out to help her up. Caleb Thornton hadn't planned to stop in Silver Creek. His wagon wheel had other ideas. Now he stood at the back of that crowd, watching a woman being sold like livestock, and something inside him that had been dead for 4 years started breathing again. If you're watching from somewhere in this world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit subscribe and stay with me to the end, because what happens next will change everything these broken souls thought they knew about mercy, survival, and what it really means to choose family when the whole world says you shouldn't. The auctioneer's voice cracked like a whip across the platform. Come on now, folks. Somebody's got to take 'em. County ain't paying room and board no more. Caleb Thornton pushed through the crowd, his broken wagon wheel forgotten. He'd heard auctions before. Cattle, horses, land. But this sound was different. This sound had desperation bleeding through every syllable. The woman stood on a makeshift platform of stacked crates. 8 months pregnant, spine straight as a rifle barrel, but her hands shook where they pressed against her swollen belly. 3 children huddled behind her. A boy, maybe 10, trying to look brave and failing. A girl around 7, silent as stone. And the smallest, a boy no more than 4, face buried in his mother's patched skirt. "Starting bid," the auctioneer called out, sweat rolling down his temples despite the November cold. "Room and board through winter. That's all we're asking. Woman can work. Children too, the older ones." Silence. The kind of silence that judged before it condemned. "She's cursed." A woman in brown homespun stepped forward, arms crossed tight. "Everyone knows it. Husband dead 3 months, and look at her, still swelling with child. That ain't natural." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, agreement spreading like infection. "Henry Dawes weren't cold a week before she was showing," another voice added. "You do the math on that." The pregnant woman didn't flinch, didn't defend herself. She just stood there with her chin level and her eyes fixed somewhere above the crowd, like she'd learned that speaking up only made things worse. The 10-year-old boy stepped forward, fists clenched at his sides. "You shut your mouth about my mama!" "Thomas?" The woman's voice was quiet but firm. "Don't." "But they're lying! Pa knew about the baby. He knew and he didn't care because—" "Thomas, enough." The boy's face crumpled. He stepped back, and the 7-year-old girl reached out and gripped his hand. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them cried. They'd learned better than that. Caleb's chest tightened. 4 years ago, he'd had a son, Benjamin, 4 years old, with his mother's smile and Caleb's stubborn jaw. Benjamin would have been 8 now, would have been standing just like that 10-year-old, fists clenched, ready to fight the whole world for his family. Would have been. If Caleb had been home that night, instead of 40 miles away, chasing outlaws who didn't matter anymore. "Look," the auctioneer tried again, desperation creeping into his voice now. "I ain't asking for charity. You'd be getting labor in exchange. Woman's strong despite her condition. Boy's old enough to work. Girl can help with—" "That woman's trouble." A man in a leather vest spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Marcus Prescott's been looking for her 3 counties over. Says she stole from her dead husband's family. Says she owes a debt." The woman's composure cracked. Just for a moment. Just enough for Caleb to see the terror flash across her face before she buried it again. "I didn't steal anything," she said, her voice steady but thin. "I took what was mine. What Henry left for me and the children. That ain't what Marcus says." "Marcus Prescott is a liar." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The woman in brown homespun laughed, cold and mean. "Listen to her, calling a respectable businessman a liar. and her standing there big with another man's bastard. The baby is my husband's. The pregnant woman's voice rose now, trembling with fury she could barely contain. Henry knew. Henry wanted this child. We'd been trying for years, and finally... Her voice broke. She pressed her hand harder against her belly. He was so happy. He was so happy, and then the fever took him, and I... She stopped, swallowed hard, looked at her children. I don't owe you an explanation, she said quietly. I don't owe any of you anything. You owe Marcus Prescott plenty, the man in the vest shot back, and he's coming to collect. Anyone takes you in is taking on that trouble. The auctioneer wiped his face with a grimy handkerchief. Well, there you have it, folks. Any takers? Anyone willing to provide for a widow and 3 young'uns through winter? More silence. The 7-year-old girl tugged on her mother's skirt. Mama, she whispered, but the whisper carried in that terrible quiet. Mama, what happens if nobody wants us? The woman's face shattered. She knelt down, ignoring her swollen belly, ignoring the crowd, ignoring everything except her daughter's pale, frightened face. Someone will want us, Abigail. Someone always. $18. Every head turned. Caleb hadn't planned to speak. The words came out before his brain caught up with his mouth. But once they were out, he didn't take them back. He stepped forward, the crowd parting reluctantly to let him through. He could feel their eyes on him. Judgment. Curiosity. The particular kind of meanness that came from people who'd already decided the ending and just wanted permission to walk away from it. I'm sorry, the auctioneer stammered. Did someone say $18? Caleb's voice was steady now, certain. Cash, room and board through winter, and the 18 on top. The pregnant woman stared at him. Caleb met her gaze. Gray eyes, storm cloud gray, wide with something between hope and terror. She had the look of someone who'd stopped believing in rescue a long time ago, but couldn't quite kill the last stubborn ember of it. That's, the auctioneer cleared his throat. That's more than generous, mister. May I ask your name? Caleb Thornton. I've got a ranch 25 miles north. Thornton Ranch. Recognition flickered across a few faces. Caleb had passed through Silver Creek once or twice over the years. Kept to himself. Didn't cause trouble. That was all anyone needed to know. Mr. Thornton, the auctioneer continued, relief flooding his voice. That's a fine offer. Do I hear? You won't. The woman in brown stepped forward, her face twisted with something ugly. Nobody here's fool enough to outbid that man for damaged goods. Caleb's jaw tightened. Watch your mouth, ma'am. Or what? The woman laughed. He'll defend her honor? What honor? She's standing there 8 months gone with a bastard child, 3 young'uns she can't feed, and a dead husband's brother hunting her down. That's what you're buying, Mr. Thornton. That's the bargain you're making. Caleb looked at the woman on the platform, at her shaking hands, at her children pressed together like they were trying to disappear, at the 10-year-old boy glaring at the crowd with hatred too old for his face. Sold, Caleb said quietly. We done here? The auctioneer nearly collapsed with relief. Sold to Mr. Caleb Thornton for $18 cash and provision through winter. Caleb pulled the bills from his pocket. Everything he had left after the feed store in Laramie. He handed them over without comment, and the auctioneer counted them twice before making a notation in his ledger. She's your responsibility now, a heavy voice said behind him. Caleb turned to find the sheriff, barrel-chested man with a star pinned to a vest, straining at its buttons. His face said he'd seen this show before, and didn't much care how it ended. Anything goes wrong, the sheriff continued. It's on you. You understand that? Nothing's going wrong. You say that now. The sheriff shrugged. But Marcus Prescott's got papers. Legal ones. Says the woman owes him, and he means to collect. She's under my roof now, my responsibility. Marcus Prescott wants to discuss it, he can come find me. The sheriff studied him for a long moment. Your funeral, Thornton. He walked away, and Caleb turned back to the platform. The pregnant woman still stood there, her children pressed close, all four of them staring at him like they couldn't quite believe what had happened. Like they were waiting for the trick, the angle, the price they'd be expected to pay. Caleb climbed the platform steps. Ma'am? She flinched when he got close. Subtle, automatic. The kind of flinch that came from expecting pain and learning to brace for it. Caleb stopped, gave her space. My name's Caleb Thornton. I've got a wagon outside town with a broken wheel. Soon as it's fixed, we'll head out to my ranch. It's warm there, safe. You and your children will have a roof and food through winter, longer if you need it. The woman's throat worked. Why? One word, but it carried the weight of everything she'd been through, every broken promise, every hand that had hurt instead of helped, every time she'd trusted and been betrayed. Why would you do this? Caleb thought about it, really thought about it. Because 4 years ago, he'd buried his wife and son in the hard Montana ground. Because he'd spent every day since then just surviving, not living. Because he'd walked past suffering 100 times, telling himself it wasn't his business. And every time, something inside him died a little more. Because this woman and her children were drowning, and he still knew how to swim. Seemed like the right thing to do, Caleb said finally. That's all. Her eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back, hard, and lifted her chin. I don't have anything to offer in return. I can work, but the baby's coming soon, and I don't know if I can. Didn't ask for anything in return. Everyone asks for something. I'm not everyone. She stared at him, searching his face for the lie, the trap, the cruelty hiding behind kindness. Whatever she found there, it made her breath catch. Eleanor, she said finally. My name is Eleanor Dawes. Ellie. These are my children, Thomas, Abigail, and Samuel. Caleb nodded to each of them in turn. The 10-year-old boy, Thomas, glared at him with open hostility. You think buying us makes you something special, mister? Thomas! Eleanor's voice was sharp. No, it's all right, Caleb said. He crouched down so he was eye level with the boy. You're right to be angry. What happened up here today? What those people said about your mother? That wasn't fair. And I don't think buying anyone makes me special. I just think you and your family deserve better than being left out in the cold. That's all. Thomas's jaw tightened. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. My pa was a good man. I believe you. He loved my mama. He loved all of us. And those people, they're lying about her. She didn't do nothing wrong. I believe that too. Then why'd you have to buy us? Thomas's voice cracked. Why couldn't they just help because it's the right thing? Caleb felt that question hit somewhere deep. Because the world was cruel. Because people were afraid. Because helping cost something. And most folks weren't willing to pay. I don't know, Caleb admitted. But I'm helping now. That's got to count for something. Thomas held his gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. It counts. Caleb stood. We should get moving. I'll have the wheelwright fix my wagon. Might take a few hours. You folks can rest at the general store while we wait. Thank you, Eleanor whispered. I don't know how I'll ever... You don't have to repay me, Mrs. Dawes. Just take care of yourself and those children. That's payment enough. They climbed down from the platform together. The crowd had mostly dispersed, the entertainment over. Caleb heard fragments of conversation as they walked. Fool and his money. Won't last the winter, See how charitable he feels when Marcus comes calling." Caleb ignored them. Eleanor walked beside him, one hand pressed to her lower back, the other gripping little Samuel's hand. Thomas took Abigail's hand and walked ahead, shoulders squared like a soldier marching into battle. At the wheelwright shop, a grizzled man with arms like tree trunks took one look at Caleb's broken wheel and grunted. 3 hours, $5. Caleb had $4.17 left to his name. "I'll work off the difference, whatever you need." The wheelwright studied him, then studied the pregnant woman and 3 children standing in the shop's shadow. "Make it $4 even," the man said gruffly. "Don't need no extra work." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just get him out of town before dark. Marcus Prescott's got eyes everywhere." Caleb settled Eleanor and the children on a bench in the shade while he waited. He found some bread and cheese at the general store, trading the watch his father had given him, the only valuable thing he had left, for enough food to see them through the next few days. When he brought the food back, Eleanor stared at it like it might disappear. "When did you last eat?" Caleb asked quietly. "Yesterday. We gave the children our shares this morning." "We?" "Thomas and I." She looked at her son, pride and grief mixing in her expression. "He insisted. Said he was old enough to go hungry, so Samuel and Abigail wouldn't have to." Caleb handed the bread to Thomas first. The boy hesitated. "My mother and the little one should—" "There's enough for everyone. Eat." Thomas looked at his mother. She nodded, her eyes bright with tears. He took the bread and divided it carefully, making sure Abigail and Samuel got the largest pieces before taking his own. 10 years old, and already carrying the weight of a man twice his age. Caleb sat on the edge of the bench, giving them space. "Mrs. Dawes." "Eleanor, please," or "Ellie." She broke off a small piece of cheese and ate it slowly, like she was teaching herself to trust that food would still be there tomorrow. "You saved our lives, Mr. Thornton. You might as well use my Christian name." "Ellie, then. You can call me Caleb." She nodded, and for a moment, something almost like a smile crossed her face. "Caleb. That's a good name. Strong." "Was my grandfather's." "Was he a good man?" "The best man I ever knew." "Then you come by it honestly." Caleb felt heat rise to his face. He wasn't used to kindness, wasn't used to being seen as anything other than the rancher who'd lost everything and gave up. "You mentioned Marcus Prescott," Caleb said, changing the subject. "The man looking for you. What's the truth of it?" Eleanor's expression shuddered. "The truth is complicated." "I've got time." She was quiet for a long moment, watching her children eat. Then she said, "Henry was Marcus's younger brother. They owned the family ranch together, out past Copper Ridge. When Henry died, Marcus claimed everything. Said the ranch was his by right. Said Henry's share reverted to him." "But Henry left you something." "Henry left me everything." Eleanor's voice hardened. "His share of the ranch, his savings, everything. He wrote it in his will, proper and legal, witnessed by the preacher and the town doctor. But Marcus says the will is forged, says I tricked Henry when he was sick, says I'm a thief and worse." She stopped, swallowed hard. "He says the baby isn't Henry's, says I was unfaithful while Henry was dying, says that proves I'm the kind of woman who'd forge a will." "Is it true? Any of it?" Eleanor looked at him with those storm-gray eyes, and Caleb saw fury there. Fury and grief and exhaustion so deep it seemed carved into her bones. "Henry was sick for 6 months before he died. Consumption. We knew he was dying. We both knew." Her voice broke. "He wanted another baby. Said he wanted to leave me something that would keep me company after he was gone. Said he wanted the children to have a sibling who'd never know grief the way they would." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "So we tried. And it worked. And Henry lived just long enough to feel the baby kick for the first time. She pressed her hand to her belly. He was so happy, Caleb. So happy. And then he was gone. And Marcus showed up at the funeral and told me I had a week to clear out. That the ranch was his. That the children and I weren't welcome. What did you do? I showed him Henry's will. Legal, witnessed, clear as day. Eleanor laughed, bitter and broken. He tore it up in front of me. Said it didn't matter what a piece of paper said. Said I was a woman alone with children, and no judge in the territory would take my word over his. Caleb's jaw tightened. So you ran. I ran, took the children and the money Henry had hidden for me, and I ran. Marcus has been chasing us ever since. 3 towns, 4 months. Every time we settle somewhere, he finds us. Every time we start to feel safe, he shows up with his papers and his lies and his... She stopped. His what? Eleanor didn't answer, but Caleb saw her hand move, unconscious, protective, to her upper arm where a bruise might hide under fabric. He hit you. It wasn't a question. Eleanor flinched. Once, when I refused to sign over my rights, he said he was trying to help me, said I was hysterical, said women didn't understand business. And the second time? Her silence was answer enough. Marcus Prescott isn't coming near you again, Caleb said, and his voice was quiet but final. You're under my protection now. My roof, my rules. And my rules say no one lays a hand on you or those children. Eleanor stared at him. You don't even know us. I know enough. Marcus has money, power, the law on his side, or at least enough money to buy it. You're one man with a broken wagon and, she gestured at his worn clothes, his calloused hands, and not much else from what I can see. I've got a rifle that shoots straight, and a piece of land nobody's taking from me. That's enough. It's not enough, Caleb. You don't understand. Marcus doesn't stop. He doesn't give up. He'll come for us, and when he does, then I'll be there. Eleanor's breath caught. Why? She asked again, and this time the word was barely a whisper. Why would you risk everything for strangers? Caleb was quiet for a long time. He thought about Grace, his wife, the way she laughed, the way she made even the hardest days feel bearable. He thought about Benjamin, his son, the way he used to run across the ranch yard, arms spread wide, pretending to fly. He thought about the night he came home to find them both gone, the outlaws already fled, the house silent, the graves he dug alone in frozen ground because he couldn't bear to let anyone else touch them. 4 years ago, Caleb said slowly, I lost everything that mattered. My wife, my son. I wasn't there when they needed me. I was 40 miles away, doing a job I thought was important, and while I was gone, he stopped, swallowed. I couldn't save them. I tried. God knows I tried. But by the time I got home, it was over. And every day since then, I've been asking myself, what's the point? What's the point of surviving if you're not really living? What's the point of having a ranch and land and a rifle that shoots straight if you're just going through the motions, waiting to die? He looked at Eleanor, at her children, at this broken little family that the world had given up on. Then I saw you up on that platform, and I thought, here's something I can actually do. Here's someone I can actually help. And maybe that won't bring back what I lost. Maybe it won't fix anything. But at least it's something. At least it's better than just watching. Eleanor's tears fell freely now. Caleb, you don't have to say anything. He stood, brushing dust from his trousers. You don't owe me anything. Just let me help. That's all I'm asking. The wheelwright called out that the wagon was ready. Caleb helped Eleanor to her feet. She moved slowly, one hand braced against her belly, and he could see the exhaustion in every line of her body. 8 months pregnant, 3 children to protect, and she'd been running for 4 months without rest. She was the strongest person he'd ever met. "Thomas," Caleb said, "can you help your mother to the wagon? I'll carry Samuel." The boy nodded. Some of the hostility faded from his face. He offered his mother his arm like a gentleman, and Eleanor took it with a smile that made her whole face change. Caleb lifted little Samuel, who was so tired he didn't even protest. The boy's head dropped against Caleb's shoulder, and he was asleep before they reached the wagon. Abigail walked beside them, silent as always, but she looked up at Caleb with something in her eyes that might have been the beginning of trust. They loaded into the wagon as the afternoon sun began to fade. Caleb settled Eleanor and the children in the bed on blankets he'd laid out, making sure they were warm enough for the journey ahead. "It's about 25 miles," he said. "We'll camp halfway if you need to rest." "We can make it," Eleanor said, but her voice was thin with exhaustion. "We'll see." Caleb climbed onto the bench, released the brake, and guided the horses north out of Silver Creek. The town fell away behind them. Caleb felt every eye watching until they crested the ridge and disappeared from view. Then it was just open country, rolling toward the mountains in shades of brown and gray and white, where early snow had begun to settle on the higher peaks. Behind him, he heard Eleanor murmuring something soft to the children, heard Samuel's sleepy response, heard Abigail's silence, which somehow felt less empty than before. And he heard Thomas's voice, quiet but clear. "Mama, do you think we'll be safe now?" Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I think we might be, sweetheart. I think we just might be." Caleb kept his eyes on the road ahead. He didn't know what the future held. Didn't know if Marcus Prescott would come. Didn't know if he could protect this family the way he'd failed to protect his own. But for the first time in 4 years, he felt something other than the cold weight of grief. He felt purpose, and that was enough for now. The wagon hit a rut in the road, and Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her belly. Caleb pulled the horses to a stop immediately. "You all right?" "Fine." Eleanor's voice was strained. "Just the baby, moving around." "We can stop, rest a while." "No," she shook her head firmly. "Keep going. I want to be somewhere safe before dark." Caleb hesitated, then clicked his tongue and set the horses moving again, slower this time, more careful. Behind him, Thomas shifted closer to his mother. "Mama, you're pale." "I'm tired, sweetheart, that's all." "You should sleep. I'll watch Samuel and Abigail." "Thomas." "I'm 10, Mama. I can handle it." Eleanor's hand found her son's face in the fading light. "When did you grow up so fast?" "When Pa got sick." The words hung in the cold air. Simple, brutal, true. Caleb kept his eyes on the road, but his chest ached. He remembered that moment, the exact moment when childhood ended and something harder took its place. For Thomas, it had been watching his father die. For Caleb, it had been digging 2 graves in frozen ground. Some things aged you in ways years never could. They traveled another hour before Eleanor's breathing changed. Caleb heard it. The sharp intake, the held breath, the slow exhale through clenched teeth. "We're stopping," he said. "I told you we're stopping." He guided the wagon off the road to a flat stretch near a creek. The water was running fast, not frozen yet, and the sound of it filled the silence as Caleb set the brake and climbed down. Thomas appeared at the wagon's edge. "What can I do?" "Help me get a fire going. You know how?" The boy's chin lifted. "Pa taught me." "Good. Gather some deadfall. Nothing green, nothing wet. I'll get your mother settled." Thomas jumped down and headed for the tree line, with a purpose that made Caleb's heart twist. 10 years old, and already carrying a man's weight. Caleb moved to the back of the wagon, where Eleanor sat with Samuel asleep in her lap and Abigail pressed against her side. The 7-year-old hadn't spoken a word since the auction, hadn't made a sound. She just watched everything with those 2 old eyes, like she was cataloging threats. "Can you walk?" Caleb asked Eleanor. "I think so." He helped her down carefully, one hand supporting her elbow, the other hovering near her back but not touching. She moved like every joint hurt, and when her feet hit the ground, she swayed. Caleb caught her. "Easy. I'm fine." "You keep saying that. Because I have to be." Eleanor straightened, pulling away from his support. "I don't have the luxury of being anything else." Caleb let her go. He understood that kind of strength. The kind that came from having no other choice. The kind that held you together until the moment it didn't, and then you shattered into pieces no one could put back together. "Sit by the fire once Thomas gets it going," Caleb said. "I'll make some food." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." Eleanor stared at him. "Why do you keep doing that?" "Doing what?" "Being kind. Like it costs you nothing." "Maybe because it doesn't." She shook her head slowly. "Everything costs something, Caleb. Everything." He didn't argue. He just went to help Thomas with the fire. The boy had gathered a good pile of kindling, dry and well chosen. Caleb showed him how to build a proper structure, how to coax the first spark into flame, how to feed it slowly so it wouldn't smother. "You're good at this," Thomas said grudgingly. "Had practice. You live alone out here?" "Have for 4 years." "Why?" Caleb added another stick to the growing flames. "Lost my family. Didn't much feel like being around people after that." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry." "Me too." "How'd they die, if you don't mind me asking?" Caleb did mind. He minded every time he thought about it, every time he dreamed about it, every time he saw a woman with dark hair or a child running across a field. But this boy had watched his own father waste away from consumption. He'd earned the right to ask hard questions. "Outlaws," Caleb said shortly. "Came to the ranch while I was away. My wife and son were home alone." Thomas's face went pale. That's awful." "Yeah." "Is that why you helped us? Because you couldn't help them?" The question hit like a fist. Caleb looked at this 10-year-old boy with his father's jaw and his mother's eyes, and he saw the truth there, the understanding. This child knew about loss in ways most adults never would. "Maybe," Caleb admitted. "Maybe that's part of it." "What's the other part?" "Your mother needed help. You all did. And I could give it. That's reason enough." Thomas nodded slowly. "Pa used to say that's what makes a man. Not strength or money or land. Just being willing to help when you can." "Your pa sounds like a wise man." "He was." Thomas's voice cracked. "He was the best man I ever knew." Caleb put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Then you've got good blood in you. Hold on to that." The fire was burning strong now, throwing warmth into the cold night air. Caleb left Thomas tending it and went to check on the others. Eleanor had settled on a blanket, with Samuel still sleeping against her. Abigail sat apart, knees drawn to her chest, staring at the flames with empty eyes. Caleb crouched down near the silent girl. "Abigail?" No response. "You hungry?" Nothing. "I've got some bread. Cheese, too. Your brother and sister are going to eat. You should, too." Abigail's gaze shifted to him, just for a moment, just long enough for Caleb to see the fear there, the deep, wordless terror of a child who'd seen too much and couldn't find her way back. "It's okay," Caleb said softly. "You don't have to talk. You don't have to do anything you don't want. But you're safe now. I promise you that." Abigail's eyes filled with tears. She didn't cry, didn't make a sound. The tears just spilled over and ran down her cheeks in silent streams. Caleb didn't try to comfort her, didn't try to make it better. He just sat there with her, quiet and present, letting her know she wasn't alone. After a while, Eleanor appeared beside them. "She hasn't spoken since Henry died," Eleanor said quietly. "She was with him when it happened, holding his hand. He asked her to sing to him, and she did. And then he—" Her voice broke. "She was singing when he stopped breathing. She hasn't made a sound since." Caleb's heart clenched. "How long ago?" 3 months. Thomas says she'll talk again when she's ready. I pray every night that he's right." "He probably is. Grief takes its own time." "You sound like you know." "I didn't speak for 6 months after I buried my wife and son. Couldn't find the words. Felt like anything I said would be a betrayal of their memory." Eleanor sank down beside him, her movements slow and careful. "What changed?" "Nothing. Everything." Caleb shrugged. "One day I woke up and realized that being silent wasn't honoring them. It was just another way of dying. So I started talking again. To the horses, mostly. They're good listeners." Despite everything, Eleanor smiled. "Horses?" "Got 3 of them, plus a milk cow and some chickens. They don't judge, don't ask questions. Just accept whatever you give them." "That sounds peaceful." "It is. Lonely, but peaceful." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for what you said to Abigail, for how you've treated all of us." She turned to look at him, and her gray eyes were bright in the firelight. "Most men would have expected something by now, would have made it clear that help comes with a price." "I'm not most men." "No, you're not." Something passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but something. Recognition, maybe. The understanding of 2 people who'd walked through fire and come out the other side scarred, but still standing. "We should eat," Caleb said, breaking the moment. "Long day tomorrow." They shared a simple meal around the fire. Bread, cheese, dried beef. Nothing fancy, but hot coffee made it feel like a feast. Even Abigail ate a little, accepting the food from Caleb's hand without meeting his eyes. Samuel woke up long enough to eat, then fell asleep again in his mother's arms. Thomas stayed awake, watching the darkness beyond the firelight, like he expected trouble to come walking out of it. "I'll take first watch," the boy announced. "No," Caleb said. "You'll sleep. All of you. I'll keep watch." "But, Thomas," Caleb's voice was firm but kind. "You've been the man of this family for 3 months. You've done a hell of a job. But tonight, you get to be a kid. Let me worry about keeping everyone safe." Thomas's lower lip trembled. "What if something happens? What if Marcus—" "If Marcus or anyone else comes near this camp, they'll have to go through me first. And I don't go down easy." The boy held Caleb's gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, the tension drained out of his shoulders. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." He went to his mother, curled up beside her on the blanket, and was asleep within minutes. The exhaustion had finally caught up with him. Eleanor looked at Caleb over her sleeping children. "You're good with him." "He's a good kid. Makes it easy." "He hasn't let himself rest since Henry died. Not once. He thinks he has to protect us all." "He's 10. He shouldn't have to." "No, he shouldn't." Eleanor's hand found Thomas's hair, stroking gently. "But this world doesn't care about should. It just is what it is." "Maybe, but that doesn't mean we can't try to make it better." Eleanor was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Caleb? Yeah? I was wrong about you. Back in town, when you bid on us, I thought you were crazy, or stupid, or maybe both. What do you think now? I think you might be the first decent man I've met since my husband died. Caleb didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He just sat by the fire, rifle across his knees, and watched the darkness while Eleanor and her children slept. They reached the ranch just past noon the next day. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the small log house and felt something shift in his chest. He'd built this place with his own hands, had raised the walls, laid the roof, dug the well. Grace had planted the garden. Benjamin had named the horses. Now strangers were going to live here. Number. Not strangers. Family. Maybe. This is it, he said. Eleanor climbed down carefully, one hand on her belly, and stood staring at the house like she couldn't quite believe it was real. It's yours? Has been for 8 years. Caleb, it's beautiful. Beautiful wasn't the word Caleb would have used. The porch sagged on one side. The garden had gone to weeds. The whole place had the look of somewhere that had been maintained, but not loved. But Eleanor was looking at it like it was a palace. It's safe, she said softly. That's what makes it beautiful. It's safe. Thomas had jumped down and was already exploring, circling the house with Samuel on his heels. Abigail stayed by the wagon, watching the horses in the corral, with an intensity that made Caleb pause. Abigail, he said, you want to meet them? The girl looked at him, didn't speak, didn't nod, but she didn't look away either. Caleb walked to the corral, and after a moment, Abigail followed. The 3 horses lifted their heads as they approached. The big bay gelding, the paint mare, and the old gray that Grace had ridden before. This is Sage, Caleb said, pointing to the paint mare. She's gentle, doesn't bite, doesn't kick. She's been lonely since... He stopped. Abigail looked at him, and something flickered in her eyes. Understanding, maybe. The recognition of loss. Caleb cleared his throat. She's been lonely for a while. Could use a friend. Abigail stepped closer to the fence. Sage wandered over, curious about this small human who stood so still. Her nose stretched across the top rail, nostrils flaring as she investigated Abigail's scent. Slowly, carefully, Abigail lifted her hand. Sage's nose touched her palm. Soft, warm, alive. And Abigail smiled. It was small, fleeting, gone almost before it appeared. But it was the first expression Caleb had seen on her face, besides fear and emptiness. He didn't comment on it, didn't want to spook her. He just stood there and watched a little girl find something she'd lost. That night, Caleb moved his things to the barn. Eleanor protested. You can't sleep out there. This is your home. It's yours now, too. You need privacy, space to settle in. But I've slept in that barn plenty. The loft's warm enough, and I can keep better watch from there anyway. Eleanor's brow furrowed. Keep watch? You think Marcus will find us this quickly? I think Marcus has money and connections and a grudge. That's a dangerous combination. Caleb, I don't want you to... Stop. His voice was gentle but firm. Stop trying to talk me out of protecting you. It's not going to work. Eleanor stared at him. You're the most stubborn man I've ever met. Second most. Your son's got me beat. A laugh escaped her. Small, surprised, like she'd forgotten how to make that sound. Fair enough. Caleb headed for the barn, but Eleanor's voice stopped him. Caleb? He turned. I haven't felt safe in 4 months, she said quietly. Not once. Not for a single moment. But tonight, in your house, with my children sleeping in a real bed for the first time since Henry died, She pressed her hand to her heart. "Tonight, I feel safe. You gave us that. I won't forget it." Caleb nodded. "Good night, Eleanor." "Good night, Caleb." He didn't sleep much. He sat in the barn loft with his rifle, watching the road, watching the darkness, waiting for something he couldn't name. Around midnight, he heard hoofbeats. Distant, getting closer. Caleb was down the ladder and in position before the rider crested the ridge. He had his rifle aimed and ready when the horse came into view. Single rider, moving fast, coming straight for the ranch. "That's far enough," Caleb called out. The rider pulled up, hands raised. "Easy, friend. Just delivering a message." "From who?" "Marcus Prescott. He wants you to know he's coming. Tomorrow. With the sheriff and papers signed by a judge. Says the woman and children are his legal responsibility, and he means to collect them." Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. "Tell Marcus Prescott that Eleanor Dawes is under my protection. She's not going anywhere." "Mister, Marcus don't care about your protection. He's got the law on his side. Sheriff Hayes is riding with him. You try to stop them, you'll hang for it." "Then I'll hang, but I won't step aside." The rider was quiet for a moment. "You know what you're doing? You're throwing away your life for a woman you just met." "Seems like. Anything else?" "Just this." The rider lowered his hands slowly. "Marcus said to tell you that if you give up the woman and children peacefully, he'll let you keep your ranch. No trouble, no charges. Just hand them over and this all goes away." "And if I don't?" "Then he'll take everything. Your ranch, your freedom, your life. He's got the power to do it, mister. And he will." Caleb stepped forward, letting the moonlight fall on his face. "You go back to Marcus Prescott. You tell him I said no. Tell him Eleanor and her children are staying right here. Tell him if he wants them, he can come try to take them. But he should bring more men than he thinks he needs. Because I'll kill the first 10 through the gate. And after that, we'll see." The rider stared at him. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met, or the craziest." "Maybe both. Now get off my land." The rider wheeled his horse around and disappeared into the darkness. Caleb stood there for a long time, rifle still raised, heart pounding against his ribs. Tomorrow. Marcus was coming tomorrow. He found Eleanor on the porch when he turned around. She was wrapped in a blanket, her face pale in the moonlight. "I heard everything," she said. "You should be sleeping." "How can I sleep when you're out here making yourself a target?" "Eleanor." "He'll kill you, Caleb. Marcus doesn't bluff. If you stand against him, he'll destroy you." Caleb climbed the porch steps and stood in front of her. "Then let him try." "This isn't a joke." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You've known us for 2 days. 2 days. You can't throw your life away for—" "I can, and I will." "Why?" The word was almost a scream, desperate, broken. "Because 4 years ago, I wasn't there when my family needed me," Caleb said quietly. "I was 40 miles away, doing a job I thought mattered. And while I was gone, everything I loved was taken from me. I've spent every day since then wondering what would have happened if I'd been there. If I could have saved them. If I could have done something." He took her hands in his. "I can't go back. I can't change what happened. But I can be here now. I can stand between you and Marcus Prescott. I can give your children a chance to grow up safe. And if that costs me my life," he shrugged, "then at least I'll die doing something that matters." Eleanor was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. "I can't let you do this." "You can't stop me." "Caleb, please." "Eleanor." His voice was gentle but unbreakable. "Look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "I'm not doing this because I have to. I'm doing it because I want to. Because you and Thomas and Abigail and Samuel deserve better than running and hiding and being afraid. Because your baby deserves to be born into a world where at least one person was willing to fight for it. He squeezed her hands. Let me fight for you. Please. Eleanor stared at him for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Caleb froze. He hadn't been touched like this in 4 years. Hadn't let anyone close enough. But Eleanor held on, her pregnant belly pressed between them, her tears soaking into his shirt. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Caleb let himself hold her back, just for a moment. Just long enough to remember what it felt like to have someone to protect. Then he stepped away. "Go inside, get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Eleanor wiped her face. "What about you?" "I've got preparations to make." "Caleb." "Go, Eleanor. Please." She went, and Caleb spent the rest of the night preparing for war. By dawn, he'd positioned himself at the gate with his rifle, his revolver, and enough ammunition to hold off an army. Thomas appeared beside him just after sunrise. "I want to help." "No." "Mr. Thornton," I said no. "Your job is to protect your mother and siblings. If anything happens to me, you get them out the back way and head north. There's a preacher in the next town who'll take you in." "But, Thomas," Caleb turned to look at the boy, "you're brave. Braver than most men I've known. But this fight isn't yours. Your family needs you alive. So stay in the house, keep that rifle I gave you ready, and pray you don't have to use it." Thomas's jaw tightened. "If you die, then you'll know I died doing something that mattered. That's more than most men get." The boy's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want you to die." Caleb put a hand on his shoulder. "Neither do I. But some things are worth dying for. Your mother, your sisters, your little brother. They're worth it. Now go." Thomas went, and Caleb waited. The riders came just before noon, 7 of them. Marcus Prescott in front, the sheriff beside him, 5 more men behind, all armed, all ready for trouble. Caleb raised his rifle. "That's close enough." Marcus pulled up his horse. He was a handsome man, sharp-featured and well-dressed, with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Mr. Thornton, I was hoping we could resolve this peacefully." "Turn around and ride away. That's peaceful." "I'm afraid I can't do that." Marcus held up a piece of paper. "I have a court order giving me custody of Eleanor Dawes and her children. As their closest living relative, I'm legally responsible for their welfare." "She doesn't want your responsibility." "What she wants is irrelevant. The law is the law." Caleb's finger rested on the trigger. "The law doesn't mean much when it's bought and paid for." Marcus's smile thinned. "Careful, Mr. Thornton. You're 1 man against 7. The sheriff is here to enforce a legal order. If you interfere, you'll be arrested, charged with obstruction, and probably hanged. Is that really how you want this to end?" "It's how I'm willing to let it end." "For strangers? You'd die for people you've known 2 days?" "I'd die for people who need help and can't help themselves. That's the only qualification that matters." Marcus stared at him. "You're insane." "Maybe. But I'm also the man standing between you and that house. And I'm not moving." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "Thornton, don't be a fool. Nobody wants bloodshed here. Just step aside and let us—" "No." The word hung in the cold air. Marcus's face contorted with rage. "Fine. Have it your way. Sheriff, arrest him." The sheriff hesitated. "Marcus, maybe we should—" "I said arrest him." The sheriff drew his pistol, and Caleb pulled the trigger. The shot went wide deliberately, kicking up dirt at the sheriff's horse's feet. The animal reared, nearly throwing its rider, and chaos erupted. "The next one goes through someone's chest," Caleb shouted. "Anyone who wants to test me, step forward." No one moved. Marcus was screaming orders, but his men were looking at Caleb's rifle, at his steady hands, at his eyes that said he meant every word. "You can't hold us off forever," Marcus snarled. "Don't have to. Just have to hold you off long enough." "Long enough for what?" Caleb smiled. "You'll see." And from the ridge behind Marcus, a voice rang out. "Marcus Prescott! You're a long way from home." Every head turned. Reverend Jonas Whitmore sat on a horse at the top of the ridge, and beside him were a dozen more riders, men from town, men who'd heard about the auction and what came after, men who'd decided that maybe, just maybe, one man standing up for what's right deserved some backup. "This isn't your business, Reverend," Marcus called out. "I'm making it my business. These good folks say Eleanor Dawes is under Caleb Thornton's protection now. Say he bought her fair and legal at the county auction. Is that true?" Marcus's face went purple. "She's family property. She belongs to—" "She's not property." The Reverend's voice was iron. "She's a woman, a mother, a person. And from where I'm sitting, it looks like Mr. Thornton's doing what Christian folks ought to do, protecting the vulnerable. Can you say the same?" Silence. Marcus looked at his men, looked at the riders on the ridge, looked at Caleb, still standing with his rifle raised. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Not by a long shot. Maybe not, but it's over for today. Sheriff, I suggest you take Mr. Prescott home before someone does something we'll all regret." The sheriff holstered his pistol. "Let's go, Marcus." "I won't forget this," Marcus snarled at Caleb. "Any of this." "Neither will I." Marcus wheeled his horse around and rode away, his men following. Caleb lowered his rifle. His hands were shaking. The Reverend rode down from the ridge and stopped beside him. "That was either very brave or very stupid, Mr. Thornton." "Probably both." "Well," the old man smiled, "sometimes that's what the world needs. Someone foolish enough to do the right thing when everyone else is too smart to try." The riders dispersed, heading back to town with stories to tell and opinions to spread. And Caleb stood at his gate, watching them go, knowing that this was just the beginning. Marcus would be back, with more men, more papers, more threats. But for today at least, they were safe. He turned and walked toward the house. Eleanor stood on the porch, tears streaming down her face. "You're alive," she said. "Seems that way." "Caleb, She pressed her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. "The Reverend, those men, how did you—" "I didn't. They came on their own." "But why?" Caleb climbed the porch steps and stood in front of her. "Because sometimes people surprise you. Sometimes, when you stand up for what's right, others find the courage to stand with you." Eleanor threw her arms around him again. This time, Caleb didn't hesitate. He held her back, and in the doorway behind her, Thomas stood watching. The boy's eyes were wet, but he was smiling. 3 days passed without incident. 3 days of waiting, watching, jumping at every sound that might be hoofbeats on the road. Caleb barely slept. He split his time between ranch work and standing guard, his rifle never more than arm's reach away. Eleanor tried to help where she could, but her pregnancy made everything harder now. She tired easily. Her ankles swelled. The baby had dropped low, pressing against her spine in ways that made her gasp. "You need to rest," Caleb told her on the 4th morning. "I need to be useful." "You are useful. You're growing a whole person. That's work enough." Eleanor laughed despite her exhaustion.
You have a strange way of looking at things, Caleb Thornton.
So I've been told. Thomas had taken over most of the chores. He fed the chickens, milked the cow, helped Caleb with the horses. The boy worked without complaint, throwing himself into every task like he was trying to prove something. Maybe he was. Abigail spent her days at the corral, watching Sage. The paint mare had taken to the silent girl, coming to the fence whenever Abigail appeared, nuzzling her hands, breathing warm air against her hair. It was the closest thing to communication Abigail had with anyone. Samuel, the youngest, had attached himself to Caleb like a shadow. Wherever Caleb went, the 4-year-old followed, asking endless questions in the way only small children could.
Why is the sky blue? Why do horses eat grass? Why don't you got a wife?
That last question stopped Caleb cold. I had one, he said quietly. She died.
Oh,
Samuel considered this with the gravity of a child encountering death for the first time.
that's sad.
Yeah, it is.
Do you miss her?
Every day.
Mama misses Papa too. She cries sometimes when she thinks we're sleeping.
Caleb's chest tightened. Your mama loved your papa very much.
Do you think she'll love someone else someday?
The question hung in the air, innocent and devastating. I don't know, Samuel. That's not something you can plan.
I hope she does.
The boy looked up at Caleb with those big, trusting eyes.
I hope she finds someone who makes her not cry anymore.
Caleb didn't know what to say, so he just ruffled the boy's hair and went back to mending the fence. That night, Eleanor found him on the porch.
Samuel told me what he said to you.
Caleb stiffened. He's just a kid. Doesn't know what he's saying.
He knows more than you think.
Eleanor lowered herself onto the bench beside him, one hand pressed to her belly. Children see things adults miss. They don't have all the filters we've built up. Maybe. He likes you. All of them do. Even Thomas, and he doesn't like anyone. Thomas is a good kid. He is, but he's also protective, suspicious. He didn't trust you at first. And now? Now he watches you the way he used to watch Henry. Eleanor's voice softened. Like you're someone worth learning from. Caleb didn't know how to respond to that. I've been thinking, Eleanor continued, about Marcus, about what happens when he comes back. He'll come back, no question about that.
I know, and when he does, he'll have more men,
more legal papers, more power. She turned to look at him, her gray eyes steady.
Caleb, I can't let you risk your life again. Not for us.
I already told you. I know what you told me.
But I've been thinking of another way. A way that might stop Marcus legally, without anyone getting shot.
Caleb's brow furrowed.
What way?
Eleanor took a deep breath.
Marriage.
The word dropped between them like a stone into still water. If I married someone else, Eleanor continued, her words coming faster now. Someone with legal standing, someone who could claim guardianship of my children and my unborn baby, then Marcus would have no claim. I wouldn't be a widow under his family's authority anymore. I'd be a wife under my husband's protection. Caleb's mind raced. You want to marry someone? I want to marry you. Silence.
Eleanor, I know it's not fair, her voice cracked.
I know I'm asking too much. You've already given us everything, your home, your safety, your future. I have no right to ask for more. But Caleb, if there's any other way to stop Marcus without you getting killed, I can't see it. Marriage is permanent.
I know.
You'd be binding yourself to a stranger, taking on his name, his debts, his... You're not a stranger. Eleanor grabbed his hand, her grip fierce. You're the man who spent his last dollar on us at an auction. The man who stood alone against 7 armed riders. The man who's treated my children with more kindness in a week than Marcus showed in 3 months. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm not asking you to love me, Caleb. I'm asking you to save us. One more time. Caleb looked at her. This woman who'd lost everything and was still fighting. This mother who'd run across 3 counties to protect her children. This stranger who'd become something more without either of them planning it. I won't lie to you, Caleb said slowly. I don't know if I can love anyone again. Not the way I loved Grace. Part of me died with her and Benjamin. I don't know if that part can come back. Eleanor nodded, more tears falling. I understand. But Caleb turned to face her fully. I respect you. I admire you. And I care about what happens to you and your children. If marrying you keeps you safe from Marcus Prescott, he took a breath. Then yes, I'll do it. Eleanor's face crumpled. Caleb, but I need you to understand something. His voice was firm now. This won't be a real marriage. Not at first. Maybe not ever. I'll protect you. I'll provide for you. I'll treat you with respect. But I can't promise you love. I can't promise you a happy ending. All I can promise is that I'll try. Eleanor wiped her face with trembling hands. That's more than I had any right to hope for. Then we're agreed? We're agreed. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of what they'd just decided settling over them. Then Eleanor laughed, soft and broken. Well, this isn't how I imagined getting engaged. How did you imagine it? I didn't. After Henry, I never thought. She shook her head. It doesn't matter. What matters is that my children will be safe. That this baby will be born with a father's name on its birth certificate. About the baby, Caleb hesitated. You know people will talk. They'll say it's not Henry's, no matter what we tell them. Let them talk. I've stopped caring what people say. And Marcus? He'll claim the marriage is fraud. He'll say I coerced you. He can claim whatever he wants. The law is clear. A woman's husband has priority over her husband's brother. Once we're married, Marcus has no standing. Caleb nodded slowly. Then we do it soon, before he comes back with his lawyers and papers. How soon? Tomorrow, if Reverend Whitmore will perform the ceremony. Eleanor's breath caught. Tomorrow? No point in waiting. Every day we don't act is a day Marcus has to make new plans. But I don't have anything. No dress, no ring, no... You have yourself. You have your children. That's enough. Eleanor stared at him. You really are the strangest man I've ever met. Is that a yes? It's a yes. The next morning, Caleb rode to town alone. He found Reverend Whitmore in the church, sweeping dust from between the pews. Mr. Thornton, the old man's face creased with concern. Is everything all right? Has Marcus... Not yet, but he will. That's why I'm here. Caleb explained the plan in short, clipped sentences. The marriage, the legal protection, the urgency. Whitmore listened without interrupting. When Caleb finished, the Reverend was quiet for a long moment. You understand what you're asking, he said finally. Marriage is a sacred bond. It's not something to be entered into lightly. I know. Do you love this woman? I barely know her. Then why? Because she needs help. Because her children deserve better than being hunted. Because I can do this one thing that might actually matter. Whitmore studied him with those sharp, knowing eyes. And what about what you need, Caleb? What about what you deserve? I stopped thinking about what I deserve 4 years ago. Maybe it's time you started again. Caleb shook his head. Will you do it or not? I'll do it. The Reverend set aside his broom, but not because of legal protection or strategic advantage. I'll do it because I see something in you that you don't see yourself. Something good. Something worth nurturing. I don't know what you're talking about. No, you wouldn't, Whitmore smiled. That's exactly the point. Come back this afternoon. Bring Eleanor and the children. I'll have everything ready. Caleb hesitated. There's one more thing. Yes? I need a ring. The Reverend's smile widened. I might be able to help with that. When Caleb returned to the ranch, he found Thomas waiting at the gate. Where'd you go? Town. Why? Caleb climbed down from his horse. I need to talk to your mother. About what? Thomas. She's not just some woman you can do whatever you want with. The boy's fists clenched at his sides. She's my mother, and if you think I'm going to marry her, Thomas went still. What? I asked your mother to marry me last night. She said yes. The ceremony's this afternoon. The boy's face cycled through a dozen emotions: shock, confusion, anger, fear. You can't. I can, and I am. But you don't even love her. I care about her. I care about you and your sisters and your brother. Sometimes that's enough. It's not, Thomas's voice cracked. My pa loved my mama, really loved her. And you're just... I'm just trying to protect her, Thomas. Protect all of you. Marcus Prescott is coming back, and when he does, he'll have legal papers that say he has a right to take your family. The only way to stop him is if your mother has a husband, someone with more authority than Marcus. So you're doing this because of Marcus? I'm doing this because it's the right thing. That's not a reason to get married. Maybe not. Caleb crouched down to the boy's level. But it's the reason I have, and I need to know if you're okay with it. Because if you're not, if this is going to make things worse instead of better, then I'll find another way. Thomas's lip trembled. You're asking my permission? I'm asking for your blessing. There's a difference. The boy stared at him, tears streaming down his face. My pa was the best man I ever knew. I know. He loved us, all of us. He would have died for us. I know that too. You're not him. No, I'm not. I'm not trying to replace him, Thomas. I'm just trying to keep the promise I made when I bought you off that auction block. I said I'd keep you safe. This is how I do it. Thomas was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, he wiped his face with his sleeve. Okay. Okay? Okay. You can marry her. The boy's jaw tightened. But if you ever hurt her, if you ever make her cry, I'll kill you myself. I don't care how big you are. Fair enough. Thomas nodded sharply. I'm going to tell Mama you're back. He ran toward the house, leaving Caleb standing at the gate. Caleb watched him go. This boy who'd been forced to grow up too fast, who'd watched his father die and his family sold, who was now watching a stranger prepare to take his father's place. Thomas was right. Caleb wasn't Henry Dawes. He never would be. But maybe, if he did this right, he could be something else, something different, something this family needed. Maybe. The ceremony took place that afternoon in the small church in Silver Creek. Eleanor wore a dress that Mrs. Chen, the Chinese laundress who'd heard about the auction, had altered from her own daughter's wedding gown. It was too short and too tight across Eleanor's pregnant belly, but Mrs. Chen had added panels and let out seams until it fit well enough. You look beautiful, Mrs. Chen said, dabbing at her eyes. Like a bride should look.
I look like a pregnant widow in a borrowed dress. Same thing. Beautiful.
Thomas stood witness for his mother, his face pale but determined. Abigail stood beside him, still silent, but she'd let Mrs. Chen put ribbons in her hair. Samuel fidgeted in his seat until the Reverend began speaking, and then he went still, watching with wide eyes. Caleb stood at the front of the church and felt the weight of what he was about to do settle on his shoulders. This was permanent. This was real. This was the rest of his life. Reverend Whitmore's voice filled the small space. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Caleb James Thornton and Eleanor Rose Dawes in holy matrimony. Eleanor walked toward him, one hand on her belly, the other gripping a small bouquet of winter wildflowers that Mrs. Chen had somehow found. She was beautiful, not in the way Grace had been beautiful, not in any way Caleb could compare, but beautiful in her own right. Strong, fierce, unbroken despite everything that had tried to break her. She reached his side and took his hand. Her fingers were cold and trembling. So were his. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, the Reverend continued. It is a sacred bond, a covenant between two people and their Creator. It requires patience, sacrifice, and above all, commitment. He looked at Caleb. Do you, Caleb James Thornton, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live. Caleb's throat tightened. He thought about Grace, about the vows he'd spoken to her 12 years ago in a church much like this one, about the promises he'd made and kept until death took her away. He'd never expected to say these words again. I do. The Reverend turned to Eleanor. And do you, Eleanor Rose Dawes, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? To have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? Eleanor's voice was steady. I do. The ring? Caleb pulled a small gold band from his pocket. The Reverend had found it in his collection of donated items, a ring left by a widow who'd passed years ago. It was simple, plain, but it fit Eleanor's finger like it had been made for her. With this ring I thee wed, Caleb said, sliding it onto her hand. Eleanor looked at the ring, then at him. I don't have anything for you, she whispered. You've given me enough. The Reverend smiled. By the power vested in me by this territory and in the sight of God, I now pronounce you husband and wife. He paused. You may kiss your bride. Caleb hesitated. This part hadn't been discussed. Eleanor tilted her face up to his, her eyes asking permission. He leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead, gentle and chaste. It wasn't a lover's kiss, but it was something. Mrs. Chen dabbed at her eyes again. Samuel clapped his hands. Thomas stood rigid, his face unreadable. And Abigail? Abigail stepped forward and wrapped her arms around both Caleb and Eleanor. She didn't speak, but she held on tight. And Eleanor sobbed. The papers were signed, witnessed, and filed before they left the church. Keep this safe, Reverend Whitmore said, handing Caleb the marriage certificate. This is your proof, your protection. When Marcus comes with his lawyers, this piece of paper is worth more than any gun. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet. The Reverend's face grew serious. Marcus Prescott won't accept this. He'll challenge the marriage, say it's fraudulent, say Eleanor was coerced. Let him try. He will, and he'll bring more than papers next time. Watch your back, Caleb.
They rode home as a family. Caleb at the reins, Eleanor beside him, the children in the wagon bed behind. It felt strange, domestic, like something from a life Caleb had stopped believing in years ago. "What do we do now?" Eleanor asked quietly. "We wait. We prepare. And when Marcus comes, we're ready." "I mean us. You and me. What do we do?" Caleb considered the question. "I don't know. I've never been married to someone I barely know." "Neither have I." "Then I suppose we figure it out together." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "Thank you. For doing this. For not expecting anything." "I told you. I don't expect anything." "I know. That's what makes it harder."
"Harder?"
"If you expected something, I'd know where I stand. But you don't. You just give and don't ask for anything back. I don't know how to live with that."
You don't have to live with anything. Just be yourself. Take care of your children. Get through each day. That's enough. Eleanor's hand found his arm.
"You're a good man, Caleb Thornton."
"I'm not sure about that."
"I am."
They reached the ranch as the sun began to set. Caleb helped Eleanor down from the wagon and started unhitching the horses, while Thomas took the younger children inside to start supper. He was halfway done when he heard the hoofbeats. Fast. Multiple riders, coming from the south. "Eleanor," Caleb said quietly, "take the children inside. Lock the door."
"Caleb."
"Now." She went. Caleb grabbed his rifle and moved to the gate. 6 riders crested the ridge, Marcus Prescott in front. But not the sheriff this time. These men looked different, harder, meaner. The kind of men who did things for money without asking questions. "Mr. Thornton!" Marcus's voice carried across the cold air. "I heard some interesting news in town today." Caleb raised his rifle. "That's close enough." The riders stopped, but Marcus's smile only widened. "Married, are you? Congratulations!"
"How long did you know her before you decided to play hero?"
"A week?"
"What do you want, Marcus?"
"What I've always wanted. Eleanor and the children. They're my family." "They're my family now." Marcus laughed. "You think a piece of paper changes anything? You think some country preacher waving a Bible makes you her husband?" He shook his head. "I've got lawyers, Thornton. Real lawyers. They'll tear that marriage apart in a week." "Let them try." "They will. But in the meantime, I thought I'd make you a more personal offer." The riders spread out, surrounding the gate. "Here's how this works," Marcus continued. "You sign over the woman and children to me tonight, and I'll let you keep your ranch. Your life. Everything. No lawyers, no courts, just a simple business transaction. And if I refuse, then these gentlemen behind me are going to burn this place to the ground, with you in it." Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger.
"You'd murder a man for a woman who doesn't want you?"
"Murder," Marcus laughed again. "This isn't murder. This is justice. Eleanor is mine. She's always been mine. Henry stole her from me, and now you're trying to do the same thing. But I won't let it happen. Not again."
"You're insane."
"I'm determined. There's a difference." Marcus leaned forward in his saddle. "Last chance, Thornton. Walk away. Let me have what's mine. Or die in fire like the fool you are." Caleb looked at the men surrounding him. 6-1. Bad odds. Worse if they had torches and weren't afraid to use them. But behind him was a house with a pregnant woman and 4 children who were counting on him to keep them safe. He couldn't fail them. He wouldn't. "You want Eleanor?" Caleb said quietly. "Come take her." Marcus's smile vanished. "Kill him." The first shot went wide, kicking up dirt at Caleb's feet. He dropped and rolled, firing back, and one of the riders cried out as the bullet found his shoulder. Chaos erupted. Gunfire, shouting, the thunder of hooves as riders scattered for cover. Caleb ran for the barn, using it as a shield while he reloaded. His hands were steady despite the fear screaming through his veins. He'd been in gunfights before. Not many, but enough to know that panic got you killed. "Spread out," Marcus was shouting. "Circle the house. Don't let him—" A shot rang out from the house. Thomas. The boy was at the window, Caleb's spare rifle in his hands, firing at the riders with more courage than sense. "Thomas, get down!" Caleb screamed. But the boy kept firing. And then Eleanor was there, pulling him away from the window as bullets shattered the glass. Caleb saw red. He broke cover and charged, firing as he ran, not caring about the bullets whizzing past his head. One rider fell, then another. A horse screamed and went down, throwing its rider into the dirt. Marcus wheeled his mount toward the house, pistol raised. "If I can't have her, no one will." Caleb threw himself between Marcus and the door. The bullet hit his shoulder. Pain exploded through his body, hot and blinding, but he didn't go down. He raised his rifle with his good arm and fired. The shot caught Marcus's horse in the chest. The animal collapsed, taking Marcus down with it. The remaining riders fled. Caleb fell to his knees, blood streaming from his shoulder, his vision swimming. The last thing he heard before darkness took him was Eleanor screaming his name. Eleanor's hands were covered in blood. Caleb's blood. She pressed hard against the wound in his shoulder, feeling the warm pulse of life seeping through her fingers. He was unconscious, his face pale as death, his breathing shallow and ragged. "Thomas, boil water! Get the cleanest cloth you can find!" The boy ran without question.
"Mama?"
Samuel's voice was high with terror.
"Is Mr. Caleb dead?"
"No, sweetheart, he's not dead. He's going to be fine." She didn't know if that was true. She didn't know anything except that she had to stop the bleeding. Abigail appeared beside her, silent as always, but her small hands reached out and pressed down on the wound alongside Eleanor's. Her face was calm, determined, like she'd made a decision and nothing was going to change it. "That's it, Abigail, just like that. Keep pressure." Thomas came running back with a pot of water and strips torn from a bedsheet. "What else?" "My sewing kit, the needle and thread, and whiskey if there's any left." "Mama, you're not going to—" "The bullet has to come out, Thomas. If it stays in, the wound will fester. He'll die." Thomas went pale. "Do you know how to do that?" "I watched your father do it once, on a ranch hand who got shot during a cattle drive." Eleanor's voice was steadier than she felt. "I can do this. I have to." "But—" "Thomas, go." He went. Eleanor looked at Abigail. "I need you to hold him down when I start. Can you do that?" The girl nodded. "It's going to hurt him. He might scream. He might fight. But you can't let go. Understand?" Another nod. "Good girl." Thomas returned with the supplies, and Eleanor worked fast. She cleaned the wound as best she could, poured whiskey over it to kill whatever infection might already be setting in, and then picked up the needle. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't afford to shake. She took a breath, steadied herself, thought about her children, about this man who'd risk everything for them, about what would happen if she failed. Here we go. The bullet was lodged deep, but not as deep as she'd feared. She worked by feel, ignoring Caleb's groans, ignoring the way his body jerked against Abigail's small hands, ignoring everything except the task in front of her. Finally, her makeshift probe touched metal. Got it. She extracted the bullet slowly, carefully, and dropped it on the floor with a soft clink. Blood welled up, but slower now. Cleaner. Thread. Thomas handed it over. Eleanor stitched the wound closed with small, precise movements, the way she'd seen Henry do it all those years ago. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't professional. But it would hold. Bandages. She wrapped his shoulder tight, then sat back, exhausted. Caleb's breathing had evened out. "Is he going to live?" Thomas asked quietly. "I don't know. The next few hours will tell us." "What about Marcus?" Eleanor's jaw tightened. She'd forgotten about Marcus in the chaos. The man who'd started all this. The man who'd shot her husband. Her husband. The word felt strange, foreign, but also right in a way she hadn't expected. "Stay with Caleb," she told Thomas. "If he wakes up, give him water. Small sips." "Where are you going?" "To check on Marcus." "Mama, no!" "He might still be alive, Thomas. He might be out there, hurt and dangerous. I need to know. Then I'll go." "You'll stay here and protect your brother and sisters." Eleanor's voice was iron. "That's an order." Thomas wanted to argue. She could see it in his face. But he nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Eleanor grabbed Caleb's rifle and stepped outside. The yard was quiet now. Too quiet. The bodies of 2 hired men lay motionless in the dirt. Their horses had fled, and the smell of gunpowder hung heavy in the cold air. Marcus was pinned under his dead horse. He was alive, barely. His leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, and blood seeped from a wound in his side where the horse's weight had crushed something vital. His face was gray, his breathing labored. Eleanor stood over him with the rifle raised. "You shot my husband." Marcus laughed, wet and broken. "Your husband? That's rich. You've been a widow for 3 months and married for 3 hours. That's not a husband. That's a convenience. He's more of a husband than you ever would have been. You don't know that. I know enough." Eleanor's finger tightened on the trigger. "I know you hit me. I know you threatened my children. I know you've been hunting us for 4 months like we were animals. I know everything I need to know about what kind of man you are." Marcus coughed, blood speckling his lips. "I loved you. From the moment Henry brought you home, I loved you. But you never saw me, never gave me a chance." "Love doesn't hurt people, Marcus. Love doesn't threaten. Love doesn't burn houses and shoot unarmed men." "I was trying to save you. From yourself. From that stranger who... That stranger took a bullet for me. For my children." Eleanor's voice cracked. "He threw himself between us and your gun without hesitation. That's love, Marcus. That's what it looks like when someone actually cares." Marcus's eyes filled with something that might have been tears. "Eleanor, please." "Please what? Let you go? Watch you ride off to plan another attack?" She shook her head. "No, I'm done running. I'm done being afraid. This ends tonight." "You won't kill me. You don't have it in you." "Maybe not." Eleanor lowered the rifle. "But I don't have to kill you. The cold will do that for me." Marcus's face went white. "You can't. You can't just leave me here to... Watch me." She turned and walked back to the house. "Eleanor! Eleanor, please, I'm sorry. I'll leave you alone. I'll sign whatever papers you want. Just don't leave me here to die." She closed the door behind her. His screams followed her into the house, but she didn't look back. "Mama?" Thomas was staring at her with wide eyes. "Mr. Prescott, is he..." "Alive, for now." "Are you going to help him?" Eleanor looked at her son. "Would you?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. I wouldn't. Then you understand.
She set the rifle down and went to check on Caleb. He was still unconscious, but his color was better. His breathing was stronger. The bandage had soaked through with blood, but when she checked the stitches, they were holding.
You're going to live, she told him, even though he couldn't hear. You're going to live, and we're going to figure this out. All of it. Together. She took his hand and held it, and she waited. The fever came an hour later. Caleb's temperature spiked, his body burning up as it fought the infection that was trying to take hold. He thrashed and moaned, caught in nightmares that made him cry out names Eleanor didn't recognize. Grace! Grace, I'm sorry. I should have been there. I should have... Shh. Eleanor pressed a cool cloth to his forehead. It's okay. You're okay. Benjamin! Where's Benjamin? I have to find him. I have to... He's safe. Everyone's safe. But Caleb kept fighting invisible demons, reliving horrors Eleanor could only imagine.
Papa's scaring me, Samuel whispered from the corner. Papa. The word hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Samuel had called Caleb Papa. When had that happened? When had this stranger become something more to her children? When had they started to see him as family? He's sick, sweetheart. His body is fighting the bad things in the wound. It makes people say and do strange things. Will he get better? I hope so. I'll pray for him. Samuel knelt down right there in the corner and closed his eyes, his small lips moving in silent prayer. Eleanor's eyes burned with tears. The night stretched on, endless and terrible. Eleanor didn't sleep. She kept vigil at Caleb's bedside, changing his bandages, cooling his fever, whispering words of comfort that he probably couldn't hear. Around midnight, Thomas appeared with coffee. You should rest, Mama. I can't. You're pregnant. You need to take care of yourself. I need to take care of him. Thomas sat down beside her. Why? Why what? Why do you care so much? You barely know him. Eleanor looked at her son. Do you remember what your father used to say about judging people? You judge a man by his actions, not his words. That's right. Eleanor looked back at Caleb's pale face. This man, this stranger, spent his last dollar to save us from that auction. He stood alone against 7 armed men. He married me without expecting anything in return. And tonight, he took a bullet that was meant for me. Her voice broke. I don't know if I love him, Thomas. I don't know if I ever will. But I know I owe him my life. Our lives. And I know that if he dies... She couldn't finish. Thomas put his hand on her shoulder. He won't die, Mama. He's too stubborn. Despite everything, Eleanor laughed. You think so? I know so. He's like you that way. Like me? You're both too stubborn to quit, even when everything's against you. Even when it would be easier to just give up. Thomas squeezed her shoulder. He'll live, and we'll figure out the rest. Eleanor covered his hand with hers. When did you get so wise? I learned from watching you. The fever broke just before dawn. One moment, Caleb was burning up, trapped in nightmares. The next, his temperature dropped, his breathing steadied, and he opened his eyes. Eleanor? She was at his side instantly. I'm here. Don't try to move. Marcus, is he? Not a threat anymore. The children? Safe, all of them. Caleb closed his eyes. Good. That's good. You scared me. I thought you were going to die. Takes more than a bullet to kill me. Don't joke about this. I'm not joking. He opened his eyes again and looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. I made you a promise, Eleanor. I said I'd protect you. I meant it. You almost died keeping that promise.
Almost doesn't count. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You stupid, stubborn man. Been called worse.
She laughed through her tears, then sobbed, then laughed again. The emotions were too big, too tangled, to separate into anything clean. Eleanor. She looked at him. Thank you, Caleb said quietly, for saving my life. You saved ours first. Then we're even. We're not even close to even. He smiled. It was weak and tired, but it was real. Then I guess we'll have to keep counting. The next few days were hard. Caleb was too weak to leave the bed, which frustrated him to no end. Eleanor had to physically stop him from trying to get up and check on the horses. Thomas is handling it. Thomas is 10. Thomas is capable. Let him help. I don't like being useless. You're not useless. You're healing. There's a difference. They fell into a strange rhythm, Eleanor caring for Caleb, Caleb trying to care for everyone else from his sickbed. The children adapted with the resilience only children have, treating Caleb's injury as a temporary inconvenience rather than a crisis. Samuel brought him drawings, crude pictures of horses and houses and stick figures that Samuel explained in elaborate detail. This is you, and this is Mama, and this is me, and these are my brother and sisters. We're a family now. Caleb's throat tightened. Yeah, I guess we are. Thomas reported on the ranch work with military precision, updating Caleb on every task completed and every problem encountered. The south fence needs mending. I tried to fix it, but I'm not strong enough to set the posts. I'll show you how when I'm up. When will that be? Soon. Thomas nodded, satisfied. And Abigail? Abigail brought him flowers. Wild winter blooms she'd found somewhere on the property, small and half frozen, but somehow still beautiful. She laid them on his pillow without a word, then sat beside his bed and watched him with those serious eyes. Thank you, Caleb said. She didn't respond. But she didn't leave either. She stayed until he fell asleep, and when he woke, the flowers were in a jar of water on the windowsill. A week after the shooting, Caleb was finally strong enough to get out of bed. He moved slowly, his shoulders screaming with every motion. But he made it to the porch and sat in the wooden chair that overlooked the ranch. Eleanor joined him with 2 cups of coffee. You shouldn't be up yet. I couldn't stand that bed another minute. Stubborn? You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children play in the yard. Samuel was chasing chickens. Thomas was attempting to show Abigail how to rope a fence post. None of them were succeeding, but they were laughing. Laughing. Caleb couldn't remember the last time he'd heard children laugh on this ranch. What happened to Marcus? He asked, finally. Eleanor's expression hardened. The cold took him. We found him 2 days ago, still pinned under his horse. You left him there? Yes. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Good. Good? He would have kept coming. As long as he was alive, you and the children would never be safe. Now you are. Eleanor looked at him. You don't think I'm a monster? I think you're a mother who did what she had to do to protect her family. That's not monstrous. That's survival. I watched him die, Caleb. I stood at the window and watched him freeze to death. And I didn't feel anything. Not guilt, not remorse, nothing. Maybe you'll feel it later. Maybe you won't. Either way, you made a choice, and it was the right one. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. I've never killed anyone before. You didn't kill him. The cold did. You just didn't save him. Isn't that the same thing? No, it's not. She was quiet for a long time. Caleb? Yeah? I'm glad you lived. Me too. I mean it. When I thought you were going to die, She stopped, started again. I realized something. Something I wasn't ready to admit before. What's that? She turned to face him fully. I don't want this to be just a legal arrangement. I don't want to be married to you because it's convenient or safe or practical. I want... Her voice faltered. What do you want, Eleanor? I want to try, really try, to be a family, to build something real. She took his hand. I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other. But you've shown me more kindness in 2 weeks than I thought was possible. And I think maybe, if we give it time, we could be something more than just survivors. Caleb looked at their joined hands. He thought about Grace, about the love they'd shared, about the life they'd built together before it was torn away. He told Eleanor he might never love anyone the way he'd loved Grace. But maybe that was okay. Maybe love didn't have to look the same every time. Maybe it could be different, and still be real. I'd like that, he said quietly. I'd like to try. Eleanor smiled through her tears. Really? Really. She leaned forward and kissed him. Not on the forehead like he'd kissed her at their wedding. On the lips. Soft. Tentative. A question more than a statement. Caleb answered it. The kiss deepened, became something more than either of them had expected. Something tender and fierce and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, Eleanor was laughing and crying at the same time. That was... Yeah. I didn't know if you... Neither did I. They looked at each other, and something shifted between them. The careful distance they'd maintained crumbled, replaced by something new. Something fragile, but growing. Papa, Mama, look! Samuel's voice shattered the moment. They turned to see Thomas, standing at the corral gate, a rope in his hands and a triumphant grin on his face. I caught the fence post! Caleb laughed. It hurt his shoulder, but he laughed anyway. Good job, son. Son. The word came out without thinking. Thomas froze. Everyone froze. I'm sorry, Caleb said quickly. I didn't mean to. It's okay. Thomas's voice was strange, thick. It's okay. I don't mind. You don't? No. The boy looked at his mother, then back at Caleb. I think Pa would be okay with it too. He'd want us to have someone who cared. Eleanor pressed her hand to her mouth, overcome. Thomas, I'm going to go check on the horses. He walked away quickly, but not before Caleb saw him wipe his eyes. That boy, Eleanor said softly, has been through too much. He's strong, like his mother. Like his father, too. Both his fathers. She squeezed Caleb's hand, and they sat together on the porch, watching their children play, and let themselves hope. 2 weeks later, Eleanor went into labor. It started just after midnight, a sharp pain that woke her from a dead sleep. She'd been through this before, 3 times, but it never got easier, never got less terrifying. Caleb! He was awake instantly, his hand already reaching for the rifle before he realized what was happening. The baby? It's coming. Now? Yes, now. Babies don't wait for convenient timing. Caleb threw off the blankets. What do I do? Get Thomas. He needs to take the other children to the barn. Then boil water. Lots of it. Eleanor, I don't know how to. You'll learn. Quickly. He ran. The next hours were the longest of Caleb's life. He'd helped birth foals and calves, but this was different. This was a human being. This was Eleanor, gasping and crying and gripping his hand hard enough to break bones. You're doing great, he told her, not knowing if it was true. Don't lie to me. I'm not lying. You're the strongest person I've ever met. I'm going to break your hand. Go ahead, I've got another one. She laughed, then screamed as another contraction hit. It's too fast. This baby's coming too fast. Is that bad? I don't know. She screamed again. And then Caleb saw the baby's head. Eleanor! Eleanor, I can see it! The baby's coming! Catch it! Don't let it fall! I won't! I've got it! The baby slid into his hands, slick and warm and impossibly small. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the baby cried. A thin, wavering wail that filled the room and shattered something in Caleb's chest. Is it okay? Eleanor gasped. Is the baby okay? Caleb looked at the tiny human in his hands. 10 fingers, 10 toes, lungs that clearly worked just fine. She's perfect, he said, his voice breaking. Eleanor, she's perfect. She? It's a girl. Eleanor sobbed. Caleb cut the cord the way Eleanor talked him through, then wrapped the baby in the cleanest cloth he could find and laid her on Eleanor's chest. Mother and daughter looked at each other for the first time. Hello, little one, Eleanor whispered. Hello, my beautiful girl. The baby stopped crying. Her eyes, blue and unfocused, seemed to find her mother's face. She needs a name, Caleb said. Eleanor looked up at him. I've been thinking about that, about what to call her. And? I want to name her Grace. Caleb's breath stopped. Grace? After your wife. After the woman who loved you first. Eleanor's eyes were bright with tears. If that's okay. If you don't mind. Caleb couldn't speak. He sank down beside the bed, his face level with Eleanor and the baby, and felt tears streaming down his cheeks. I don't mind, he managed finally. I don't mind at all. Grace Thornton. Eleanor smiled through her tears.
It's a beautiful name.
It is. He reached out and touched the baby's cheek with one finger. So soft, so fragile, so alive. Welcome to the family, Grace, he whispered. Welcome home. The door burst open. Thomas stood there. The other children crowded behind him. Is the baby okay? We heard screaming and— Come see your sister, Eleanor said. The children rushed in, crowding around the bed with wide eyes. She's so tiny, Samuel breathed. She's loud, Thomas observed. Abigail said nothing, but she reached out and touched the baby's hand. And Grace's tiny fingers wrapped around Abigail's. Abigail looked at her mother, then at Caleb, and she spoke. Grace. One word, the first word she'd said in 4 months. Eleanor burst into fresh tears. Caleb pulled all of them close. Thomas and Samuel and Abigail and Eleanor and tiny, perfect Grace. He held them as tight as he dared, this family that had come to him, broken and afraid, and looking for hope. They'd found it, all of them, together. Grace was 3 weeks old when the letter arrived. Thomas brought it in from the road, where a passing rider had delivered it along with the weekly post. His face was pale as he handed it to Caleb. It's got an official seal. Caleb took the envelope and felt his stomach drop. Territorial Court, Judge's Chambers. Eleanor. She looked up from nursing Grace, her expression shifting from contentment to fear in a heartbeat. What is it? Legal papers. Marcus is dead. Who would— Open it, Thomas said. Whatever it is, we need to know. Caleb broke the seal and read. The words blurred together at first, legal language he barely understood, but certain phrases jumped out. Estate of Marcus Prescott. Challenge to marriage validity. Custody hearing. Appearance required. Caleb. Eleanor's voice was tight with fear. What does it say? Marcus had a lawyer.
Before he died, he filed papers challenging our marriage.
Claiming it was fraudulent, claiming the children belonged to his estate. But he's dead. Doesn't matter. The case was already filed. Someone's continuing it.
Who?
Caleb read further. His business partner, man named Silas Crane, says he has a vested interest in the Prescott estate and wants to see justice done. Eleanor went white.
Silas. I know that name. Marcus mentioned him. They owned the saloon together and had shares in a silver mine.
What kind of man is he?
I never met him, but Marcus said he was ruthless. The kind of man who never lost at anything.
Thomas's fists clenched. So we have to go to court? Prove we're a real family? Looks that way. Caleb folded the letter. Hearings in 2 weeks. Territorial courthouse in Denver.
Denver's 100 miles away.
I know.
Eleanor can't travel that far, not with a newborn.
I know that too. Eleanor shifted Grace to her shoulder, patting the baby's back with mechanical motions.
I'll go.
Eleanor, I have to. This is my fight, my children, my marriage. If I don't show up, they'll rule against us by default. You just gave birth 3 weeks ago. I've given birth 3 times before. I know what I can handle. And Grace? She comes with me. She's nursing. I can't leave her. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, frustration and fear battling in his chest. This is insane. We shouldn't have to prove anything. We're married, legal, witnessed. The papers are filed. Since when does the law care about what's fair? Eleanor's voice was bitter. Marcus had money, power, connections. Silas Crane has the same. Men like that don't lose because they're dead. They keep fighting through lawyers and courts and technicalities until they win. So what do we do? Eleanor looked at him with those gray eyes, and Caleb saw the same fierce determination that had carried her through 4 months of running, an auction block, a shooting, and childbirth. We fight back. We go to Denver. We stand in front of that judge, and we prove that this marriage is real, that this family is real, and we make sure Silas Crane doesn't get a single one of my children. Our children, Caleb corrected quietly. Eleanor's expression softened. Our children. They left a week later. Thomas stayed behind to watch the ranch, armed with Caleb's spare rifle and strict instructions to ride for Reverend Whitmore at the first sign of trouble. The boy had argued, wanted to come, wanted to testify, but someone had to stay. You're the man of the house while I'm gone, Caleb told him. I'm counting on you. Thomas's chin lifted. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Abigail and Samuel came with them. Abigail, because she'd started speaking again, and Eleanor wanted her near. Samuel, because he was too young to leave behind. The wagon was cramped with all 5 of them, but they made do. Grace slept through most of the journey, waking only to nurse and cry and sleep again. She was an easy baby, content as long as she was close to Eleanor, and Caleb found himself watching her with a wonder he hadn't expected to feel. This tiny person, this new life, born into chaos and uncertainty, and somehow still finding reasons to smile. She had Eleanor's gray eyes, but when she slept, her face relaxed into an expression that reminded Caleb painfully of Benjamin. You're thinking about him again? Eleanor's voice was soft. They were camped for the night, the children asleep in the wagon, Grace nestled between them in a makeshift cradle. I'm always thinking about him. Tell me about him, about Benjamin. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. He was curious about everything, wanted to know how things worked, why the sky was blue, where the sun went at night. Grace used to say he asked more questions in an hour than most people asked in a lifetime. Grace, your wife. Yeah, Caleb's throat tightened. She was patient, kind, never raised her voice, even when Benjamin was being impossible. She'd just get this look,
This quiet look, and he'd settle right down. She sounds wonderful. She was. The best person I ever knew. Eleanor reached out and took his hand. I'm not trying to replace her. You know that, right? I'm not trying to be her. I know. But I want you to know that it's okay to miss her. It's okay to love her still. That doesn't take anything away from what we're building. Caleb looked at her. This woman who'd been through hell and come out the other side still fighting. This mother who'd kill to protect her children. This wife who'd chosen him without expecting love and gotten it anyway. I do love you, he said. The words came out rough, unpracticed, like something that had been locked away for too long. Eleanor's breath caught. What? I said I love you. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you stitched me up after the shooting. Maybe when you stood at that window and watched Marcus freeze. Maybe when you put Grace in my arms and asked if you could name her after my wife. He squeezed her hand. But I love you, Eleanor. Not the way I loved Grace. Different, but just as real. Eleanor was crying. Caleb, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. Before we walk into that courtroom, before everything changes, I needed you to know that this isn't just legal protection anymore. It's not just convenience. It's love. Real love. I love you too. The words tumbled out of her, fierce and certain. I've loved you since you stood alone against Marcus and his men. Since you told Thomas it was okay to just be a kid for one night. Since you held Abigail's hand and didn't try to make her talk. She laughed through her tears. God, I've loved you for so long and I was afraid to say it. Afraid it would ruin everything. It won't ruin anything. No, she smiled, radiant despite the tears. It won't. He kissed her then, properly, the way he'd wanted to for weeks. Not a question this time, but an answer, a promise, a vow more binding than any words spoken in a church. When they finally pulled apart, Grace was awake, watching them with those serious gray eyes. I think she approves, Eleanor said. She'd better. She's stuck with us. They laughed together, quiet and warm, and Caleb felt something settle in his chest. Something that had been broken for 4 years, finally starting to heal. Denver was bigger than Caleb remembered, louder, busier, full of people who didn't know or care about a rancher from Silver Creek and his complicated family. The courthouse was a massive stone building that seemed designed to intimidate, and Caleb felt small as they walked up the steps. Eleanor walked beside him, Grace wrapped against her chest, her chin high and her eyes fierce. Samuel clung to Caleb's hand. Abigail walked close to Eleanor, silent again, her earlier progress retreating in the face of this new stress. It's going to be okay, Caleb told them all. We're going to be okay. He wished he believed it. The courtroom was cold and formal, filled with men in dark suits who looked at Caleb and Eleanor like they were specimens to be studied. At a table on the opposite side sat a man Caleb didn't recognize, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, with the look of someone who'd never lost at anything. Silas Crane. All rise for the Honorable Judge Whitaker. Everyone stood. The judge was older, stern-faced, with a gaze that seemed to miss nothing. He settled into his chair and looked at the papers in front of him. This is a custody hearing regarding the minor children, Thomas, Abigail, and Samuel Dawes, as well as the infant, Grace Thornton. Mr. Crane, you've challenged the validity of the marriage between Caleb Thornton and Eleanor Dawes. Is that correct? Crane stood. Yes, Your Honor. We believe the marriage was fraudulent, entered into solely to deprive the Prescott estate of its rightful claims. And what claims would those be? Marcus Prescott, may he rest in peace, was the legal guardian of his brother's widow and children. He had documentation proving, I've seen the documentation. The judge's voice was flat. I've also seen the marriage certificate filed by Reverend Jonas Whitmore, witnessed and notarized. What evidence do you have that this marriage is fraudulent? The timeline, Your Honor. Mrs. Thornton was widowed less than 4 months before the marriage. She was purchased at a county auction by Mr. Thornton mere days before the wedding. It's clear this was a transaction, not a union. Purchased? Eleanor stood. May I speak, Your Honor? The judge nodded. I was sold at auction because the county didn't want to feed me and my children through winter. Mr. Thornton spent his last $18 to buy us, then gave us shelter, food, and protection. He asked nothing in return. When Marcus Prescott came with guns and men to take us by force, Caleb stood alone against them. He nearly died protecting us. Her voice broke. That's not a transaction, Your Honor. That's love. Even if neither of us knew it yet. Your Honor, Crane interrupted. This is emotional manipulation. The facts are clear. Mr. Thornton had no prior relationship with this woman. He married her within days of meeting her. The only logical explanation, Caleb cut in, standing, is that sometimes people do the right thing because it's right. Not for money, not for land, not for any reason except that someone needed help and they could give it. Mr. Thornton, you're out of order. I apologize, Your Honor, but I won't apologize for what I did. I saw a woman and her children being sold like livestock. I saw a town full of people who should have helped but didn't. And I made a choice. He looked at Eleanor. The best choice I ever made. Your Honor, Crane pressed, regardless of Mr. Thornton's motivations, the fact remains that Marcus Prescott had legal claim to his brother's estate, including guardianship of the children. That claim doesn't disappear simply because Marcus Prescott is dead, the judge interrupted. His claims died with him. The estate has no standing in a custody matter. Mr. Crane, unless you can demonstrate that these children are in danger, that they're being neglected or abused, I see no grounds to remove them from their mother's care. Their mother's care? Crane's voice rose. Your Honor, this woman was accused of theft by Marcus Prescott. She was accused of adultery. She was accused. The judge leaned forward. Do you have proof of any of these accusations? Marcus Prescott is dead and cannot testify. Do you have any other witnesses? Any evidence? Crane's jaw tightened. No, Your Honor. Then I'm dismissing this case. The judge picked up his gavel. The marriage between Caleb Thornton and Eleanor Thornton is valid. The children are to remain in their care. And Mr. Crane, if you bring another frivolous case to my courtroom, you'll be held in contempt. The gavel came down. Court dismissed. Eleanor collapsed against Caleb, sobbing with relief. It's over. It's really over. It's over. He held her tight, feeling the weight of fear finally lift from his shoulders. They were free. Mr. Thornton. Caleb turned. Silas Crane stood a few feet away, his expression unreadable. This isn't personal. I want you to know that. Marcus owed me money, a lot of money. His estate was supposed to settle that debt. When you married his sister-in-law, you complicated things. I don't care about your complications. No, I don't suppose you do. Crane studied him. You really did all this just because it was right? Yeah. Remarkable. Crane shook his head. In my experience, people don't do anything without expecting something in return. Maybe you've been meeting the wrong people. Crane laughed, short and harsh. Maybe I have. He tipped his hat. Good luck, Mr. Thornton. You're going to need it. He walked away. Eleanor gripped Caleb's arm. What did he mean by that? Nothing. He's just a bitter man who lost. Are you sure? I'm sure. Caleb kissed her forehead. Now let's go home. The journey back felt different, lighter, easier, like the world had shifted slightly and everything was finally settling into place. Samuel talked non-stop about the courthouse, about the judge's big chair, about the scary man who'd lost. Abigail was quiet, but she held Caleb's hand the whole way, and once, when they stopped to rest the horses, she looked up at him and said, "Papa." Just like that.
Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Caleb had to turn away so she wouldn't see him cry. They reached the ranch just before sunset on the 5th day. Thomas was waiting at the gate, rifle in hand, face anxious until he saw them crest the ridge. Then he was running, sprinting toward the wagon with his arms waving. "You're back! What happened? Did we win?" "We won," Eleanor called out. "It's over, Thomas. We're safe." The boy's face crumpled. He grabbed the side of the wagon and held on, shaking with sobs he couldn't control. "I was so scared. I kept thinking they'd take you away, that I'd never see you again, that—" "Hey," Caleb climbed down and pulled the boy into his arms. "Hey, it's okay. We're here. We're not going anywhere." Thomas clung to him. This 10-year-old had been trying so hard to be brave for so long. "I want to call you Pa," Thomas said, his voice muffled against Caleb's chest. "I know my real Pa is gone. I know he can't be replaced. But you've been more of a father to us in 2 months than most men are in a lifetime. And I want, you can call me whatever you want. Pa." Thomas pulled back, his eyes red but steady. "I want to call you Pa." Caleb's heart broke and healed in the same moment. "I'd be honored." That night, they ate dinner together as a family. All 6 of them around the table Eleanor had scrubbed clean, eating food they'd grown and raised themselves, laughing at Samuel's jokes and Thomas's stories about keeping the ranch running single-handedly. Grace slept in her cradle by the fire. Abigail fed scraps to the barn cat that had somehow become a house cat during their absence, and Eleanor looked at Caleb across the table with eyes full of love. "What are you thinking about?" she asked later, when the children were asleep and they sat together on the porch. "I'm thinking about how different things are. How different I am." "Different how?" 2 months ago, I was just surviving, going through the motions, waiting to die without really living. He took her hand. "Now I have a wife, 4 children, a baby named after the woman I lost. And I'm happy, Eleanor, actually happy. I didn't think I'd ever feel that again." "I know what you mean." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "When Henry died, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd spend the rest of my days running, hiding, being afraid. And then you came along. Stupid rancher with a broken wagon wheel. Best broken wagon wheel in history." He laughed. "I love you, Eleanor Thornton." "I love you too, Caleb Thornton." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars appear one by one in the vast western sky. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For stopping. That day in Silver Creek. For not just riding past." "I couldn't. Something in me wouldn't let me." "I know," she smiled. "That's what makes you different. That's what makes you the man I love." "I'm not special, Eleanor. I just did what anyone should do. But no one else did." She turned to face him. "That's the point. The whole town stood there and watched us being sold. Dozens of people who could have helped. And you were the only one who stepped forward. Maybe I was just the only one stupid enough." "No, you were the only one brave enough. There's a difference." Caleb didn't know what to say to that. So he just held her hand and watched the stars, and let himself believe, for the first time in 4 years, that maybe the world wasn't as cruel as he'd thought. A year later, they held a celebration. Not a wedding anniversary exactly, more like a commemoration of everything they'd survived. Reverend Whitmore came, and Mrs. Chen with her whole family, and neighbors from ranches nearby who'd heard the stories and wanted to meet the man who'd stood alone against 7 armed riders. Thomas had grown 3 inches and was helping Caleb work the ranch like a full partner. Abigail spoke in complete sentences now, though she was still quieter than most. Samuel talked enough for everyone, asking questions that made the adults laugh and shake their heads. And Grace, 1 year old, took her first steps at the celebration, toddling from Eleanor's arms to Caleb's while everyone cheered. "She's perfect," Eleanor said, watching Caleb spin their daughter in a gentle circle. "She takes after her mother." Flatterer. Truth-teller. Mrs. Chen appeared beside them with a plate of food. "You make good family," she said, nodding approvingly. "Strong, like mountain, like river, last forever." "I hope so," Eleanor said. "No hope, no," Mrs. Chen smiled. "I see many families. Most break. Some bend. But yours?" She shook her head. "Yours is different. Built on real things. Love. Sacrifice. Choice." Choice? Most powerful thing in world. You choose each other. Every day. Not because you have to. Because you want to. That's why you last. She walked away, leaving Eleanor and Caleb looking at each other. "She's right, you know," Caleb said. "About what?" "Choice. Every morning I wake up and I choose this. Choose you. Choose the children. Choose this life. And every morning, it's the easiest choice I've ever made." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "When did you become so good with words?" "I learned from watching you." She laughed and kissed him, right there in front of everyone, and the children groaned and the adults cheered, and Grace clapped her tiny hands like she understood. Later that night, after the guests had left and the children were asleep, Caleb and Eleanor stood on the porch one more time. 1 year, Eleanor said. 1 year ago, I was standing on an auction block, wondering if anyone would ever want us. And now? Now I have everything I never dared to dream about. A husband who loves me, children who are safe and happy, a home that no one can take away. She turned to face him. "You gave me that, Caleb. You gave us everything." "You gave me just as much." "What did I give you?" "A reason to live." He pulled her close. "For 4 years, I was just existing, breathing, waiting. You woke me up. You and the children. You reminded me what it means to actually be alive." "We saved each other." "Yeah," he smiled. "I guess we did." She rested her head against his chest, and he held her, and the night wrapped around them like a blessing. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "Are you happy?" "More than I ever thought possible." "Good." She looked up at him. "Because this is just the beginning. We've got years ahead of us, decades, a whole lifetime to build something beautiful." "I can't wait." "Neither can I." They stood together, husband and wife, survivors and fighters, 2 broken people who'd found each other and built something unbreakable. Behind them, the house was warm with sleeping children. Before them, the land stretched out in endless possibility. And between them, a love that had started with $18 and a broken wagon wheel, and had become the foundation of everything. Eleanor was right. This was just the beginning. But what a beginning it was. They'd been strangers on an auction block, sold like livestock, unwanted by a world that should have protected them. Now they were a family, bound not by blood, but by choice, not by law, but by love.
And nothing, not Marcus Prescott, not Silas Crane, not all the cruelty in the territory, had been able to break them. Caleb looked at his wife, at his home, at the life they'd built together, and he knew, with absolute certainty, that he'd made the right choice that day in Silver Creek. The only choice. The best choice. He'd bought a dying widow and her children with his last $18, and in return, they'd given him something he'd thought was lost forever. A family. A future. A reason to believe that even in the darkest times, even when the whole world turned away, one person standing up could change everything. One choice, one act of courage, one refusal to look away from suffering. That was all it took. That was all it ever took. And Caleb Thornton, rancher, husband, father, survivor, would spend the rest of his life proving it, every single day, for the rest of his life.